Alright everyone, a lower court was continuing to try to witch hunt after Michael Flynn, and here's the overall backstory. Michael Flynn gets prosecuted. He pleads guilty. Now the reason that he pled guilty is probably not related to guilt, and the FBI's own internal findings show that they weren't even sure that he was lying. The fact that he was even allowed to plead guilty at the time or compelled to plead at all is pretty funny in that case. In order to avoid greater charges related to, I think, 5 counts of lying to the FBI, I think there were other counts, he decided to plead guilty to one charge. He would have spent a few weeks in jail, in other words. It would be like Papadopoulos all over again. Essentially, what the government tries to do, and this is something people need to understand, this happens to the poor all the time, and you know, sucks to be them because they don't get national attention. An appeals court, a U.S. appeals court's not going to help them out because they don't have the money to appeal it forever. Like Michael Flynn would have more ability to raise funds and so forth, justice for Michael Flynn. Think about some random lower classer from the ghetto. You know, the prosecutor basically says, look, you're going to jail because you can't fight us. Just plead guilty to this lesser charge, serve your time, you know, basically we're enslaving you for a few months, and you know, you won't have a felony on your record. You can still, like, you know, do your thing. Most cases in the United States, severe or minor, end in appeals. I mean, in a plea deal. They do not end in actual full-on prosecution. The person essentially says, I'm fucked because the state has limitless resources and I don't. They have unlimited legal capabilities and I don't. They can literally throw me in a cell in order to keep me from even researching for my own case. I can't do that to them. And so they get fucked. And so they take a plea deal in order to avoid greater charges. That's how most cases end in the United States. Not in guilt or acquittal, but just in, oh yeah, I plead guilty to this other charge. Here's the thing. Michael Flynn pled guilty, and then he, you know, of course, on new exculpatory evidence that had been initially withheld by the government for malicious purposes, and this should be a major national scandal, but of course, Trump is Orange Man bad, and Flynn worked for him, so there's no will among the legacy media to bother talking about the case. He decided to say, well, you know, I'm reversing my initial plea of guilty to this charge because I didn't lie. And of course, the exculpatory evidence shows that there's no compelling evidence that he did lie. Essentially, he was lying about lying. The judge in the case took the extraordinary step, despite the fact that the prosecution, the government, which was the plaintiff in the case, wanted to drop the case. They said, look, we can't proceed with this. He's reversing his plea deal, and there's exculpatory evidence that was maliciously withheld. This was a botched witch hunt of a politicized case, and we're dropping it. The judge took the extraordinary step of becoming the plaintiff in order to continue the case and say, you can't do that. The prosecution is not allowed to rest its case and withdraw it. You're not allowed to do that because I don't like Michael Flynn. That's basically what it is. The judge in this case was a massive partisan. A total goddamn leftist partisan who clearly didn't like Michael Flynn on a politically visceral level. Now 2 other judges have stepped in and said, you know, to the judge, you can't be the prosecutor and the plaintiff. You're the judge in the case. You're supposed to be impartial. You're dropping it. And so now Michael Flynn has finally, at long last, after a witch hunt that has lasted legendary amounts of time, is finally fully vindicated. And people are saying, well, he pled guilty. He lied to the FBI. He's not vindicated. He's a criminal. He just got off because Barr decided to defend him. The evidence was there to exonerate him of the charges. The FBI's own case, these are FBI agents involved with looking into him in the first place, could not determine whether he was lying. What happened is that they decided, in order to attack Trump for political reasons, to go after Flynn, to charge him with all this, intimidate him. They literally threatened to go after his family, by the way. If this were done to some random person on the street, BLM would be carrying signs in their honor and saying, no more, no justice, no peace. They'd be saying, fuck the police, fuck the system, you're trying to drag this dude through the prosecution system. And what they point out all the time, and leftists are great at pointing this out, and they're correct, is that the system of justice in the United States fundamentally doesn't work because you've got a limitless state versus usually a very limited client. They can overcharge, overstep all legal bounds, ignore the Constitution, ignore due process, and they get away with it simply because there's no entity empowered to attack them for it. They get away with this all the time. It is a problem. But suddenly, because he worked for Donald Trump, he shouldn't get due process. The fact that the case was so botched, it should have been dropped. It should have been thrown out of court. This case should have been thrown out by the judge on day one, based on the fact that there was no evidence. Based on the fact that exculpatory evidence was withheld, this judge should be retired. This judge should be kicked off the bench. He shouldn't be a judge. He obviously can't be unbiased. The case is so dire. The attack on justice here is so clear-cut and objective that when people keep repeating that line, whoa, he lied to the FBI, which, again, they can't even determine that he fucking did, and he's negating now by withdrawing his initial plea. When they say this, they had to have gotten it from a third party because these mental ignoramuses didn't dream up that one-sentence line on their own. They got it from CNN or some similar group. Well, he lied to the FBI. No, he didn't. If there's no evidence that he lied to the FBI to the point where the prosecution itself questions whether it happened, that's not evidence. There's no crime. And if there's no crime, and there's no plaintiff because the prosecution declines to continue prosecuting, and the only reason why Michael Flynn is still getting dragged under a bus through the system is because of an activistic moron piece of shit judge, that's not a case. That should have been a mistrial. This judge should not be employed anymore. He should be pressured to resign from that position. It is absolutely exasperating that that's not happening. And of course, it's because the corporate media doesn't want to defend Michael Flynn. Part of it, again, boils down to money. They know that if they release an honest story and tell you, look, there's no prosecution anymore, the FBI agents involved couldn't determine that he lied at all, and this is a minor charge anyway. It's like a 2-week in jail Papadopoulos charge. They would get dogpiled by BLM and by a bunch of Antifa, and the social justice warriors would whine and pull out their pink hair and shit themselves in frustration and demand that the sponsors drop the corporate media firm that's reporting fairly. They do this all the time. Why do you think these people refuse to report properly? In part, it's because of the CEOs there worrying about the sponsorship money. It's really the problem. So he's been completely exonerated, completely vindicated. He's free. He's fine. He did nothing wrong. This trial that lasted so long literally was just another witch hunt on top of many other witch hunts that we've seen. Again, it should be major international news. This should be the biggest national scandal of our time. The fact that the federal government under Obama attempted to defang and decapitate an incoming administration preemptively by sifting through literally everything associated with Trump to the third degree of separation. They went through everything. They violated their own very expansive rules on data collection. They violated basic prosecutorial conduct. They deliberately withheld exculpatory evidence. They've overcharged multiple people. They've worked directly with the corporate media to try to cover their ass. This should be a major national scandal. It doesn't even get talked about. People are too busy worried about Wendy's burning down right now. Must smell delicious, by the way, at least at first, till the plastic starts frying. That's about all. Peace out.